Greetings, YouTube. Recently, I read a thread on a forum. I think it was the RPG Net. I'll put the link in the notes. Dealing with the idea in a fantasy setting of there being Lilliputians, and the idea put forth by the thread originator was that these Lilliputians would only be half an inch high. So you'd have human beings that were that high, small enough they could use ants as steeds. Admittedly, they had to be large carpenter ants, but you could use ants as steeds. And his question was, or her, I actually don't know who they were, what do you think they would be useful for in a setting? And would they be able to find a connection with the larger, small and medium-sized races, saying, I'm referring to 3.5 or Pathfinder rules in this case, would they be kind of, a symbiotic relationship? And it didn't take me long to think about this, that realized that these particular Lilliputians would completely change the political structure of the world. Because these creatures would be the ultimate in assassins and spies and saboteurs. But you have to answer a couple of questions. First, does magic scale? Yes or no? All right, so if magic doesn't scale, so that a Lilliputian casts a fireball, and it's the same size as the fireball cast by a medium-sized human, that's going to be incredible. Now, there is an argument that magic doesn't scale under 3.5 and Pathfinder, because whether you're a small, medium, or large spellcaster, and we know this for sure, all the spells are the same size, which is one of the reasons why if you're going to play a spellcaster, or a wizard, or a sorcerer, it really, in my book, you should always be a small race. It makes you a smaller target, gives you you're better at hiding, and you get as much bang for your buck as a medium-sized person. And if that half-inch tall person is casting a spell the same size as a medium-sized person, that's incredible. Think about that. Not to mention healers. And as I mentioned, assassins and thieves and spies. You know the saying said, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall in that meeting? You could be a fly on that wall in that meeting! For real! You could be a druid that changes into vermin. There's the Thunderscape. It's a Kickstarter Pathfinder setting. It's being released very shortly. I was one of the supporters, and I've already got a chance to look at the world. Haven't done a complete reading yet. I haven't done a review yet. But one of the classes in it is the Entomancer, where you become a druid, a specialized druid that deals with vermin, insects, which is awesome, because vermin always get the short end of the stick in D&D, and I never understood why. But that would be perfect for these Lilliputians. You specialize in insects. Why not? They're your mainstay. They're your workhorse, your pets. They are the world for you. Obviously, there's certain classes that aren't going to do a whole lot for you, like monk, fighter, when you're dealing with large creatures. But even if magic doesn't scale, so Lilliputians are casting fireballs that are this big, this big around, as opposed to 30 feet, it's still incredible. Because you could still devastate a camp. A sorcerer or wizard on a dragonfly mount could absolutely devastate a camp just by flying through and starting fires. Who's going to see them? They're not magic. Detections aren't going to work. So it would be awesome. A druid changes into a minuscule fire elemental and just run through the camp. Everything up in flames. The chaos, the uncertainty. Any nation of small or medium people that don't have Lilliputian allies is going to lose to ones that do. You could be a fighter, your classic dwarven fighter, heavy armor, and you could have an entire support squad riding on your body. Healers, artillery, spies, assassins. You could have a druid in a crow form fly in an entire strike force, drop it into a tower to take the gate out. Rusting grasp on the chain that holds the gate in place. Open. Or the hinges. You send them from a castle out to an army that's sieging that castle, and you just damage the siege weapons. Just damage in ways that no one can see because they're done by half-inch tall people. The next morning when they decide to use their weapons, they literally blow apart. Talk about undermining the morale of the enemy and completely wiping out all their effort. Making siege weapons is not easy. It takes time. And you've just bought yourself huge amounts of time because the siegers are now stuck without any siege weapons. You can sow plague. Again, this is a game changer, folks. Major game changer. Now, another one of the questions you do, it does damage scale as far as combat. So we're ignoring the spell part. For example, right now, a human doing damage against a small person does 1d6 with a club. And since damage doesn't scale in standard D&D or Pathfinder, they still do a die 6 against a tiny creature or against one of these Lilliputians, which I probably think would fall into the category of fine. So that means that these things are incredibly tough for their size. And incredibly hard to hit because they're so tiny. It also means that their weapon, which will be a minimum like 0 points or 0 point of damage, or 1 point of damage, can't do much because they're so small. But if you're a thief, a rogue, I should say, with your sneak attack damage, well, who's going to see a half-inch tall human drops out of a ceiling on a spider thread, literally on a spider thread? Stab. 4d6 damage. 6d6 damage. 9d6 damage. Just unbelievable assassins. Now, if you want to do scaling damage, and I've just talked about that on my channel before, you can, and that would make things a little more juggly, having to worry about things. But, it makes sense that a Lilliputian doing damage against a Lilliputian should be doing a die 6 with a club. Because they're the exact same size, half-inch against half-inch. So I think there's an argument for that. The game isn't really designed around that because creatures that small are not normally fully sapient using armors and weapons, and we know them. So this is a game changer. But this is a really fascinating idea. I don't know if... I would have to think about this long and hard before I can enter it into a game. Really long and hard. Because, like I said, it's a game changer. It's going to really modify things. And any nation that doesn't have these as allies is doomed. And then you have wars to protect and also destroy Lilliputian colonies. And you end up having the Lilliputian colonies having to live with the larger races just to survive. Because those that live in the wild are going to be hunted down and captured and used as slaves or wiped out by people that don't have them and don't want someone else to use them. So you end up having a situation where as soon as they're discovered, they become integrated into larger society because they have to. They have no choice. It's that or extinction. But this was a great idea. It's a fascinating idea. It kept me occupied for hours thinking about it at work. I'm sure my boss was thrilled about that. But it's thought-provoking, and anything that's thought-provoking is going to help inspire us to come up with new ideas. And that's a good thing. Double plus good. A little newspeak for you today. So I want to know, what would you do with Lilliputians? Would you have scaling spells? Would you have scaling damage? How would you resolve that particular issue? Have you ideas that you have thought of just listening to this video that I hadn't thought of? Or do you think that any of the ideas I'm presenting are not viable? I'm interested in knowing. But this is a cool concept.